All right, and we're live.
Are we live already? Oh my goodness. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Scott?
I'm very well. I'm happy to be hanging out with you today. We're going to learn about how to create a web UI with ASP.NET Core, and we're going to use a thing called Razor Pages, which is a thing that I use for my own website. And I know that there's Razor Pages in the websites that you own as well, aren't there?
Yes, so I own the .NET website. So I'm a program manager for that marketing site that we own for .NET, everything .NET. And it is done in Razor Pages as well. So it is a technology that like production ready. It's like full scalable, right? Like we get millions of visits for our site every month. So
Yeah, tens of millions even.
yeah.
And I get dozens of visits at my website at Hanselman. It's my podcast, which is on Razor Pages, and it's just a really great way to get started. And what's nice about Razor Pages is that if you want to use React or jQuery or Angular or whatever makes you happy, Razor Pages doesn't care. And we'll talk about its role in creating a website and how just because you pick Razor Pages doesn't mean that you don't get to pick your favorite JavaScript framework as well.
Indeed. And so we are going to be using Microsoft Learn. We're going to be following along what we call a Learn module that has an entire lesson on how to create a web UI with ASP.NET Core. So Learn provides like a free platform for you to learn anything from .NET to Azure. Like there's tons of lessons there. And there's like exercises and videos, and you can apply your skills as you're learning, and you get points. And so the lesson that we're going to be doing today is going to be on that URL on the screen. So aka.ms /web UI ASP.NET Core. So I think we'll have a banner there for people to see and copy. So I think what we recommend today is that you watch us doing the lesson and going through the concepts, and then you can do the lesson on your own later on.
Yeah, I think it would be hard to do the whole lesson, watch us, because we're live. This is not a recording. But what we're going to try to do is I'm going to be following along, and you and I will do the actual lesson, write the actual code from scratch, and do whatever the lesson says so that you'll be able to see. And then this will be recorded. So if you want, you can play us back later and pause us and then follow along and achieve the same thing as well. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, that sounds awesome. In this session is supposed to be live and interactive. So say hi, ask questions in the chat that we're gonna be trying to answer them live as we go as well. So like we want to have fun with everyone that is watching us today.
Right. So right now I've got my screen open, and if we go to my system real quick, I'm looking at the .NET website. Like you mentioned, this is the site that you owned.
Mm-hmm.
You called it a marketing site, but I disagree. It is the place you go to learn about everything about .NET. It's the place you go to download .NET, which works, of course, on Windows, on Linux, on Mac. So we're going to be doing it on Windows, but if you're following along on Mac or on Linux, you'll be able to do everything that we're doing. There's no reason that anything that we're doing won't be able to be followed along with. It's a good reminder that .NET 6 runs everywhere, runs on all kinds of locations, whether it be Linux, Mac, or even a Raspberry Pi. So follow along on whatever machine that you have available to you, and you're going to have fun. And then there are also lots of Learn Lives. This thing that we're doing, this Learn Live, happens every week. So you can go and see previous weeks where we learn about things like Microsoft Teams or deep things inside of machine learning or something like this, a beginner class on ASP.NET. You can also sign up every week and spend time with new friends each time. And then I've gone to that URL that you gave me, and I've logged in with my Microsoft account. And your Microsoft account can be your Hotmail or your Gmail, your Xbox account, any Microsoft account. And I'm already logged in here, so we'll be following along live. And then I've got Visual Studio Code and the terminal. So if you've already prepped ahead of time, you probably would have gone to the .NET website here. You would have said download, and then you would download the .NET SDK for your system and installed that, and then opened up Visual Studio Code. But just like Maira said, you don't have to follow along. You can just kind of sit back and enjoy. All right?
Awesome.
Cool. So let's look at your slides. What are we building today?
Let's do it. So we have a couple of learning objectives today. So we want to understand when and why to use Razor Pages. And I don't see the slides up yet.
Let's bring up Maira's slides. We're going to learn about when to use Razor Pages, why to use it. We'll see what we're actually going to build.
Yeah, and then as you said, we're going to be using .NET 6, the .NET 6 SDK to create a new page in the app. So we're going to create the app, and then we're going to create a new page using the CLI commands. We're going to create a form that supports the product data management requirements. So it's going to be managing our business requirements. And then we're going to have client-side form input validation using what we're going to learn about tag helpers. And then we're going to have the server-side model validation. So we have client-side and server-side validation. And then on the server side, we're going to be using data annotations. And then we're going to run and test the web app.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot. Now, we could rush through this and do it in a half an hour, but we're not. This is for our early in career and our beginners and our new learners. So we are going to be going a little slower. And I think we're going to take a leisurely hour plus, maybe 90 minutes.
Yes.
If there are any questions, let us know, because again, this is not for you. If you've been coding for 20 years, you can hang out with us, but we are going to take a really leisurely pace. And anytime there's a question, maybe a question for me, maybe Maira will say, hang on, Scott, what was that? Or maybe you in the audience are going to give us a question. We're going to slow down and really try to understand what's going on. Because there's a lot of acronyms. Like you just said, CLI.
Yes.
Right. And the .NET Core command line interface, the thing you type in the terminal, is a thing. So we're going to talk about that as well.
Yeah, and Jon Galloway and I did this session in 30 minutes last week, but it felt really rushed. So I'm glad that we have the time to really dive into the concepts today and have more time for our beginner audience to really understand these concepts.
Absolutely. So let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
All right.
So where I said we're going to create an ASP.NET Core Razor Pages with .NET and C#.
Right, and it's cross-platform. So everything we're doing, I'm going to do on Windows. But if we have time, I can run it on Linux to prove that it will be cross-platform. So that's a good thing to note. And then we're going to make a pizza application. I think the next slide calls it an inventory management system for pizza.
Yes, so that's our example scenario. It's going to be a pizza inventory. And I think we have an example here of what's going to look like in the end.
Right. So this is a basic kind of an app. We call these apps CRUD apps. CRUD, C-R-U-D, create, read, update, delete. And if you have CRUD in your application, that means that you understand now how to add things, remove things, update things. And that's the beginning of almost all applications, right? Twitter is a CRUD app because you can create, read, and delete, but you can't update tweets.
Yes, you can't edit yet.
Maybe they'll learn from us today. All right.
Yeah, and that could be like one update to this app as well. You can delete and add, but you cannot edit. So that could be an improvement to our own app here as well.
Absolutely, an update for the viewer. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we hear about ASP.NET and .NET and C#, there's a lot of different names, and it can be very, very confusing. And now we're introducing a new topic called Razor Pages. And people might say, well, hang on, is that ASP.NET? What is that? It's one more concept. So let's talk about what Razor Pages are and what the benefits of Razor Pages are. So let's hop forward here. So Razor Pages are a component of ASP.NET. It's a style of server-side page-centric. That sounds kind of complicated, server-side page-centric. What does server-side mean in this context?
So I think about Razor Pages as having the two separate sides, right? So you have the UI, which we're going to be talking about Razor syntax and having a mix of HTML and C# code. And then you have the server code, the server-side code that's going to be doing the validations, doing the operations on the server versus let's say, other frameworks or like Blazor where you can have everything client side.
I see a note here from Ronald in Portland saying this is really beginner. It is. It is absolutely very beginner.
It is.
We're going to be talking about stuff from the basics because we want to make sure that folks understand what's going on and that nothing is hidden from them. But in the future, we can certainly do 300 or 400 level advanced topics, but that would be a much smaller crowd and a much different crowd. All right.
And
Cool.
someone was asking you to turn up your mic a bit, so I don't know if.
I don't know. It's
Let us.
hitting negative. It's sitting in -6 right now, and it's the same mic I use on my YouTube and my podcasting.
I can hear you super well, so.
Pretty well. So I'm going to ask them to turn up their volume, and we'll see if we have more comments about the microphone. But I appreciate that. We'll monitor that. Cool. All right. So client content can appear in these Razor pages, which is, and it's agnostic, which means it doesn't say you must use React or you must use Redux. So that's a thing to remember. But it's primarily server-side code, and server-side code still has a place on the internet right now. A lot of people think that everything should be JavaScript, where you bring the page template over, then JavaScript does some thinking and goes back and gets the data, and then the data binding happens on the client side. But that is definitely not necessary in this context. We're going to be generating markup on the server side. All right. I think folks are complaining about my microphone because if I move away, it probably sounds different. So now I'm going to have to.
But they're saying it's good now. So I think
to make sure that I do that. So a good reminder to us all, my friends. Okay, cool. So let's look at the when to use Razor Pages slide next.
All right. So when you're building like ASP.NET Core apps, you can do web apps, it can do APIs, real-time, Microsoft. You can build so much with ASP.NET Core. But I would think that Razor Pages would be for when you want to do web UI, like web apps.
Right. One thing that's worth pointing out, we won't show it today, but I've got details on my blog, is that Razor Pages don't have to make HTML. They can make SVG, they can make text files, they can make anything. You can plug them into your pipeline. And if, for example, on my page, I have a thing called a robots.txt file, which tells Google and Bing whether or not to index my site. It's actually a Razor page. Traditionally, a robots.txt has been done as a static file, but when you hit hanselman.com/robots.txt, it's a lie. It's a Razor page that's generated that, and that gives me more control. So while we are going to be using Razor Pages today for HTML, you do have a lot of flexibility. And some friends in the chat here are saying that they're great at all times, and they're a great transition for developers. So that's great.
Yeah, and he's saying like for web form developers, and that's what I was in the past, right? I used to do web forms. And then a year and a half ago, I joined your team and started taking care of our website. And that's when I started learning Razor. And so I think it's great. And right now with our website, we actually have both Razor and Blazor. So you can combine different components depending on your need.
Yep. Now we have a question here from Bruno Carlos Caetano Santos, who has had his question agreed upon with Ronald, who's saying, why use server-side rendering when you have Blazor? Well, that's a great question. So Blazor, kind of think about it like Razor on steroids, Razor++, is a WebAssembly-based language that runs .NET in the browser inside of the WebAssembly runtime and allows you to make real applications where a lot of work is being done on the client side. But then you ask yourself, like, let's go, for example, to my screen, and let me just bring up a page here. So let's switch over to show my screen. Here's my podcast. This is Razor Pages. Right now, I've got 800 episodes of the podcast here, and this is rendered. If I hit refresh, it comes back in less than 20 milliseconds. It's instantaneous. I have a basic search. I have a nice clean homepage. I have a player, and I have a previously on the show. Why does this need to be Blazor? Right? By doing it in Blazor, it would only make it more complicated. It would only make it render slower, and it would only confuse Google and Bing, right? So this doesn't really add anything. Blazor doesn't add anything to this because it's not really a web app. It's a website. Not every website has to be an app, right? So if you look at your site, we've got learn stuff, we've got beginner videos, this is a website. It doesn't really need to be an app that has deep, rich interactivity. So adding Blazor to this doesn't add a lot of value. But the administrative backend, the backend that controls this, that could be Blazor, right? The admin website that allows me to add episodes could be in Blazor. So it's about choices. I want people to understand that server-side rendering is what made the web work. And we're not going to declare it dead yet, because it is not done by any means. So great question from our friends in the chat there. Okay.
Oh.
Cool. You want to get into it, or how do you want to start?
I think so. So we cover what our learning objectives already. So I think we can hit continue. Okay. I think we can go over the prereqs there as well. So
good point. So we're assuming here that you have some basic understanding of C#. You can write a for loop. You can write some tags in HTML. And we're going to use the term RESTful. And we're going to refer to HTTP, specifically GET and POST. So some familiarity with that would be useful. Now, I've already gone through a couple of these, but I'm going to click on them again just to show you how this works. And you'll notice that when you sign in to a Learn module, they'll check off the boxes as you do them. So I'll click on Introduction. Now, this assumes that you have installed the .NET SDK and Visual Studio Code on whatever platform that you want to be on. Okay. And I'm using .NET 6. .NET 6 is just out recently, but it's what's called a long-term release or long-term support. So .NET 6 will be out and it'll be used for the next 3+ years. And I'm going to go out to the command line here, the CLI, the command line interface. And this command right here, I can actually click copy. Now that's in my clipboard. And I'm going to open up the terminal here. And I'm going to right-click in the terminal, and that pasted in what I just copied. So I can move really quickly by copying here and then right-clicking here. And then when I do that, it's going to list the SDKs, the software development kits that I have here. I have
your machine is like mine. Yes, you
like
have a lot of versions there.
Yeah. So I've got version 3, version 5. I've got a release candidate or a beta of .NET 6, and then I have the final release of .NET 6. You can also type .NET by itself and get the basic, kind of like help. And the one I usually type is .NET --info. And that'll give you way more information than you need. But if you're ever trying to debug something, .NET will tell you, hey, are you on Windows or not? Where is it installed? And things like that. But either one of those things will tell you what you need to know. So we've learned that we do, in fact, have .NET 5 and 6 installed, and we're going to be using 6. Okay.
But I'm seeing a fancy UI there. I don't have all these colorful glyphs and things that I'm seeing there. So what is that, Scott?
Okay. So I'm using the Windows terminal. And when you install the Windows terminal, it will look at your machine and it will detect the shells that you have. So if you have PowerShell or you have the old DOS prompt or the command prompt, it'll fill that up. If you have WSL, the Windows Subsystem for Linux, it will detect that you have Linux. And I'm using PowerShell. So you see this one here that's in boldface. That's PowerShell. That's my default shell. And you can actually see in the corner here, I've got the PowerShell logo. That allows me to remember which one of these I have. So if I open up Ubuntu, it has the Ubuntu logo over here. And with PowerShell, you can change your prompt. So I've gone and made my prompt colorful. So if I go to my website source code, I can see my current branch, but I can also see the version of .NET that is I'm currently using. And this is called Oh My Posh.
I love that.
And you can get that at ohmyposh.dev. And that works on any shell. So it doesn't matter if it's PowerShell or if it's Bash or whatever makes you happy. And it's a really cool kind of configurable prompt. And if you go to my blog and search for Ultimate Prompt or my YouTube, I explain how to set that up. So if your prompt looks more straightforward, your prompt might look like this. That's fine. It's the same thing. It's just a little bit more colorful, and it makes it a little more understandable for teaching. That way we know we're in .NET 6. Good
awesome.
question.
Awesome.
And then our friends at Microsoft Developer have put that in the links if you want to dig into that as well. Okay.
Yeah, and so this version of the tutorial, we're going to be using the CLI and Visual Studio Code. But there are also tutorials online that you can use Visual Studio and have different IDs. So it's your choice, but this lesson will be with the CLI and Visual Studio Code.
That's a great point. Yeah, we're using Visual Studio Code so that Mac and Linux people can do it. But to Maira's point, if you want to install, Visual Studio 2022 or Visual Studio for Mac, you can follow along as well. Okay, so you're an employee of a pizza company. You're going to make a pizza management application. We are going to, oops, I'm having a little trouble with my Zoom there. Apologies. We are going to have local installations of .NET and VS Code. The first time you open a C# file in VS Code, it might prompt you and say, hey, I think you need an extension for that, or you can install it manually. And let's go and click continue.
All right.
We talked a little bit about this, the difference between the client content and the server content, right? The client content is going to be scripts and CSS and Markdown and things like that. And then server code is going to have the server run the code first and then send the page to the browser, as opposed to the Reacts and the Angulars of the world that send the page to the browser and then go and get the data. Okay, now this is interesting here, and you've actually got a slide on this notion of a thing called the page model. This is a little challenging. I don't know how you explain it, but the way that I think about the page model is that if I'm going to show a page that has some data on it, like a list of pizzas, I want to have, I could either say for each pizza in pizzas, and spin around and make the page, that list of pizzas, or I could have an object, a C# object that kind of looks a little bit more like the page. It's like a view model. If you've ever heard of model view controller, it's like a view model, but it has some operations, it has some logic to it. So it's a little different than MVC.
Yeah, and it's scoped just to that particular page, right? But then you can add the services and models, so you can connect that page model to the other elements, so that you can bind the data, you can do operations on the data that you're showing on the page.
Yeah. And the page model is kind of like a code behind. You have your HTML and you have the code behind it. But it says, like, when this page has an HTTP GET, when someone gets this page, where do we get the data from? What do we do with it? We need someone to handle that for us. So we'll write those handlers as well.
Yes. And so I think it's time for a knowledge check.
Yeah. I do want to point out that ASP.NET, does support MVC. And you don't have to pick one or the other, because Razer Pages is built on the same infrastructure as MVC. So you can mix and match. This is a confusing thing about web development. Just because you pick Razer Pages doesn't mean you can't also have a web API, or you can't also have a model view controller. You can mix them the way that you want. So we're not going to talk about MVC, but nothing that we're going to do precludes or prevents us from using MVC later.
And I think Razer Pages hides some of the complexities of MVC. And so for someone that is starting a new project, we probably would recommend using Razer Pages for a brand new project.
It's a great place to start. So which of the following statements is true? Use Razer Pages for an app that isn't focused on HTML. Use it for web APIs. Razer Pages cannot coexist with an MVC app. Or the productivity advantage is that it keeps together what tends to change. Well, I know that it can coexist, so that's false. And I know it's great for HTML, so that's false. So then this one must be true, because the page is kept together with the view. Cool.
All right, got some points there.
Okay. Oh, and it automatically moved us to the next page. All right. So I'm going to look here. Create a new folder named Razer Pages Pizza in the location of your choice. I'm going to come out to the command line. I'm in my GitHub folder. So I'm going to say make directory Razer Pages Pizza. And then I'm going to go down in that folder. I'm typing pwd print working directory, just to make sure that people know where we are. You can be on your desktop. You can be in your source code folder. Totally fine. Totally fine. And then it's going to say .NET New Web App. And then this -F is going to say, I really want you to use .NET 6. That was added there to make absolutely sure we're using .NET 6. I don't need that, but we're going to keep that there just because we're going to follow along. I can hit copy.
Yeah, and because you can have the multiple versions of the SDK and then pin to one version using the global JSON, sometimes you think you might be using a version, and so that is just to add to make sure that that's the version you're using. And but you're right, you don't need.
Here's a note for you and I, as well as our friends that are helping us. This says Web API project. That should say Web App. So that's a mistake in that Learn module there. So we'll go and we'll update that in GitHub, and that'll be updated very quickly.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
Yeah,
you're always good at finding this.
Sorry about that. All right. So I just said .NET New Web App. Now, if I type .NET New by itself, I get a whole list of things that I can make. I can make Windows apps and console apps and Blazor apps, but I just said .NET New Web App. And you see here, I could have said Razer, or I could have said Web App, and it would have worked either way. And you'll notice that my little cool prompt here started to say 6.0. So it noticed something about this folder. When I type dir, you can see we have our program here. And we have our Razer Pages C# project here as well. So my little prompt noticed that that CS Proj was there. And that CS Proj is what you can open in VS Code or Visual Studio or whatever makes you happy. That's
so we're going to open that project on Visual Studio Code, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's do that. There's a couple ways to do it. I'm going to go ahead and say Visual Studio Code, open folder. And I'm going to say C GitHub. Now, there's lots of ways that I could potentially have opened this. I could have right-clicked in Explorer, or I could have typed code at the command line. But I just wanted to show you that there's more than one way. Okay, now we're going to open up VS Code here. And we've got our program right here. Look how it is all nice. I'm using a cool theme. You can have whatever theme makes you happy. I've got a Beyonce theme here. Called Beyonce. And if I click on extensions, you can see that I've got the Microsoft C# extension right here. And that's what allows that to know that this is C# and it does cool stuff about it. Now, you might get a prompt here that says, hey, do you want to build this? Do you want to debug this? You can say yes, you probably should. If you don't say yes, we can add it later. And in doing that, it's just going to add a little couple of files in the corner here that tell VS Code what to do with this application. All right. So it looks like a bunch of code that we don't know what it does. We'll look at that in a little bit. And it's actually going to show us kind of, here are the files that it created, right? We saw that program CS. We saw some JSON files with some application settings. And then we got our pages. So it looks like we got an error page, we got an index or a main page, and then we got a privacy page, for putting our privacy declaration there. And then we got some weird little shared folder and some other stuff there that we'll have to figure out as well, eh?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Run the page and explore its UI. Okay, cool. So we can run it from the command line. We'll just type in .NET run. So I'm going to clear my screen. I'm going to say .NET run. It says building. Now, this might take a moment the very first time, and then it'll build faster in other times. And it's going to pop up on two different ports here. Notice that we have localhost here with an HTTPS for secure, and then one that's not secure. Now, if I click on
that's something that changed with .NET 6, right? Because it used to be always port 5000 and 5001.
Yeah.
And then starting in .NET 6, it's like a random port that is assigned to your project, but you can go and change on the launch settings, Jason.
Yeah, that's a great point, Maira, that you're bringing up here, is that in the old days, the old days were yesterday.
Like last month.
What would happen was we would share. We'd have 5000 and 5001, and that's fine. But if you're doing development, you start setting cookies and you start setting application settings and HSTS and different, you start setting different castings, you would find two applications kind of fighting with each other just because they shared the same port number. So we're going to mix those port numbers up. But if you prefer it, you can definitely, as you pointed out, insist on putting it on 5000 and 5001. Now we've got a great question in the chat here where Ronald, who is familiar with .NET 5, is saying, where's your startup.cs?
Yeah, where did it go, Scott?
Yeah, that's a great point. So you can still do it that way. You can still have it with a startup.cs, but it's totally up to you. But here, this is using a thing called top level statements here. So we don't actually see public static void main, do we?
Yeah.
We just see it start right there on line 1. And
there's no using, no namespace. There's nothing there. Like,
yeah,
all gone.
Yeah, there's nothing there because you see right here, we're targeting .NET 6. I've opened up our project file, and all of those using this and system.that and system.this, they're all implicit. The great thing about this is that if you don't like it, you can just use the .NET 5 version of this. You can turn off implicit usings and it'll go back to the old behavior. But this is kind of cool because in just about 13, 14 lines of code, if we don't count the white space, we've got our application builder. We add Razer Pages. We build our app. We can see that if we're not in development, we'll use an error page. And if we are in development, we won't. We can see we've got static files and the ability to route, the beginnings of authorization, and then we go and we run our app. So it's nice and clean, but again, you have choice. There's no obligation to do it this way. Just a nice, easy, clean hello. So we come back here and we look at our page. We got our privacy page. We got our home page. So notice how when we hit this URL, you can see it's not really secure because we don't really trust localhost.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't say /index, right? It's kind of implied.
Yes.
Isn't it?
So index is your default page for any route. So if you have an index, it would still match.
Right. And I can visit /index and it's not going to get me anything. It just puts me back on home. So you're exactly right. Privacy, though, sends us here. This is called convention-based routing. So what this means is if I hit /whatever, right, I could make a scott.cshtml or a /Maira, and it would automatically use that page, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So it matches kind of. This is what I find very straightforward about Razer is that as you add new pages there, it creates the new routes automatically for you. So it matches whatever structure you put it there.
Exactly. We're getting that routing for free. I'm going to close my door for a second.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Cool. So let's go back to our follow along.
So I think we ran the project. We talked about the port already.
Mm-hmm.
So and about where you locate and kind of how you're compiling and then running the app.
Mm-hmm.
Another way that you could run this is if you want to use hot reload, right? Is using .NET Watch, which is
a great point. Let's show that, should we?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And then while we're doing that, a question in the chat here, people are asking what comments that you and I are reading. We have some friends on Learn TV, we have some friends on Twitch, and some on YouTube, and we see all of your comments. So Stephen, I'm seeing you, Steve, I'm seeing you on Twitch, and Ronald, I'm seeing you on YouTube. So we're able to see both of those.
Yeah.
So Maira just made a really great point here. I can make a change to my code and then come back and then hit run again. And then it'll build, and then I'll wait for a second, and then I'll hit the URL again, and then I'll close it, and then I'll go back, and I'll hit Control-C, and then I'll make a change, and that's a whole thing. But you said .NET Watch run, right?
No, it's just watch now.
Well, you can just say watch. You can, and the run is implied.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. I've never seen that. Ooh, look at that. Okay.
Yeah.
Good tip. I'm used to saying .NET.
Oh, I managed to talk something to Scott.
No, I always learn when I spend time with you, Maira. This is great. Okay, so Myra's shown me something new here. She's saying .NET Watch, and it says hot reload enabled. Now we can make some changes and some edits, and if those don't work, we can always press Control R, and that'll force a restart. Okay, so let's see what we can do there, Myra. Good stuff. Let's go into our index page, and I'm just going to put that over in the corner here. So I'm at a lower resolution for our friends on streaming, but I just want to show us.
You want to show it live, the hot reload behavior.
We'll say,
hi, friends.
Hey, you stole my line. All right.
That's your trademark.
It is a trademark. It is my trademark. And our friends on the chat here, including Straight Jacket on YouTube, are enjoying our vibe here. I'm going to hit Control S for save. And you notice I didn't hit refresh. I just hit Control S. Isn't that cool? All right.
And that's like all about, we're trying to improve developer productivity, right? Like we keep saying that. And so this is like one of the cool features that we have to enable that.
Yeah. So what's nice about hot reload is there's this loop. We talked about that loop that we were doing. Make a change, recompile, run the thing, click on the URL, open the 80% of that is no fun.
Yeah.
So let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it so that we can go and type in whatever we want to, hit Control S, and then it appears there. Now, there are big changes, big structural changes, moving stuff around that might not work with hot reload. And if that doesn't work, that's fine. We can just hit Control R and we'll just rebuild the whole thing. But for little changes like that, it's a real time saver. Real time saver. It's good stuff. Our friends in the chat are saying that this is too basic, and I appreciate that. This is a basic day. We're having a 101 or a beginner's stuff, but let us know in the chat what kinds of advanced topics you'd like to see for future learns. And also, I want to point out that we have, if you go to the .NET website and you click here where it says Live TV, every week, multiple times a week, we have friends that are up there. We're up there now, but look at this. We've got managing secrets in your application coming up with Jon and Leslie in a couple of days here. We've got Entity Framework. So lots of advanced topics happening all week long. We've got Maria and Cecil talking about minimal APIs and things. So maybe this isn't the stream for you, but I bet you that we have a stream that you can spend time with us on.
We have daily shows, so it's like there's something for everyone. Well, sometimes we'll have beginner content, sometimes more advanced, sometimes we're going to highlight community projects. So it's like there's something for everybody.
There's something for everybody. Now we need to hit the gas here. We're not going to get this thing done. All right.
Let's go.
All right. So explore the Razer Pages project. We've got the Pages directory here. Let's go down here and let's look at our Pages directory. And we see that we've got that index.html here. And then we've got a index.cshtml.cs. This is the page model. This is the kind of the behind of this.
Yes.
You can see that when someone calls get, when someone gets the index page, we could do a thing. Right now, we don't do anything, right? We don't do anything, but we could do something. And actually, Myra, we've got a logger that's all ready to go here. Because when someone makes our page, we ask ASP.NET, we say, hey, would you give us a logger so we can log stuff? Why don't we just show someone that when we do a get, we could say logger.log, we'll log a critical error. Oh my goodness, this is bad, right? So here's a horrible log. We've hit an error. Logger log critical. All right. Let's go back to our page here. Look at that. It hot reloaded, and we see the critical log occurring right there. So that log is available to us. We made a change to the code behind, and we immediately saw that change. Isn't that cool?
Awesome. Yeah, and you mentioned before the share directory too, that is under the pages. I do have a slide about that, and I think it would be cool to talk about. So the share directory, like we're gonna have markup, like partial markup that you can reuse on different pages. So if there's some like pieces of code that you're gonna be using throughout your site, you could be sticking that into the shared. But right now it comes with two things under that share folder. It comes with the layout CS HTML and validation scripts. So the layout, it's kind of your basic structure, right? Like, so something that all the pages will have.
Yep.
So like your header and body parts, like scripts that you're gonna be using, anything that it's part of any page of your site, it's gonna be there on the layout page.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So if we I'm going to push this off to the side, and then I'm going to take this one and I'm going to push it off to the side. Sorry about going so fast there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show this layout page, and you're pointing out things like your navigation. See this little hamburger here in the corner. That's called the hamburger menu. See how that pops open? Then we have the main, and then we have this thing called render body here on line 35. That's going to do that index.html. You know, we can actually prove it. Right? We'll say before, and we'll say after. Look at that, my friends. Look at that. So
the content of the index gets very much smaller because you don't have to repeat all of those like generic HTML code every time you stick that into the layout page.
Exactly, right. So if I go to index here, you can see how simple index is. Let's do this: before index, after index. Right? Maybe we'll have to add a little break there. You can really see that relationship now between the index page and then that layout that you called out. So that's a good point to us to remember. And that means I only have to have that page once, right? And I can reuse it everywhere. I can have multiple pages, can't I? I can have lots of layouts.
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can have different ones too.
And then you called out that partial area there, the validation stuff. We'll use that a little later. And you can go and render different sections. You can start controlling how you want things and say, put the menu here and just render the menu. Okay. All right, let's go back to our stuff and let's see what we got. Okay. So we saw that the pages directory is where all the Razer pages are stored. And by convention, if you have a Maira.cshtml, then you get a Maira.cshtml.cs. You get a page model for one-to-one, right? Every page gets a page model. And then you just called out the shared directory, where you start with 2 shared partial views, but I can add as many as I want, right?
Yeah. And one thing that also like sometimes we do is that not every page, like on the .NET side, for example, not every page will have that code behind file. So you can have just the Razer markup if there's no special code behind for a certain page.
That's a great point. And you can do this however you want. Like, for example, if I wanted this copyright section to be its own thing, pull that out, right? Make it a partial, a little tiny thing, and then I could render that on its own if I felt like it. That's a good reminder. Okay, and then we saw a little bit about the routing. So when we hit our main domain, we got index. When we hit /index, we got index. And then if we add any new page, it starts this convention. It'll automatically pick up whatever the name of the page is in the folder. I can hear your friend freaking out there, Maira.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Go check
you can mute with Control D and unmute.
Yeah.
All right.
And
All right. So what statement describes a page model? It encapsulates logic scope to a page. It provides top-level view templates, or it's a markup file Well, I'm pretty sure that it does logic because we've been doing logic for the last little while. So let's see if I'm right. I am. Hey, cool. I get some Chivos, get some achievements there. All right, let's get into actually doing the thing here. So now
Let's
we've
do it.
jumped over here into adding the page, right? So we're going to add a new page. Like your boss is mad at you there, Maira.
Yeah, my son arrived from school, so
Oh, the dog is excited to see you. Our friend Guy on the chat here said that we shouldn't have used a hamburger menu. We should have used a pizza menu, and I think that is a very valid criticism. So we should do better on that. Okay, so this is really interesting. This CLI command here, it looks like a lot here, but
yeah,
what this is actually doing is if you've ever used Visual Studio Senior or Visual Studio 2022, you can say add new form or add new page, and it does it for you. So is this the command line version of doing that?
exactly. Yeah, and the cool thing is that you will add both the Razer page and the code behind file with that command.
Mm-hmm. So we're saying .NET new page when before we said .NET new web app. We're giving it a name. We're giving it a namespace because this is the name of our project. And then we're saying put it in the pages folder. So I'm just going to copy that. I'll go back over here. And we're just going to paste that. Remember that we are in the Razer Pages pizza folder. And I'm just going to paste that in with a right click. And it's going to say Razer page created successfully. We said make me a new page with the name pizza and the namespace, and we output it here. And if you want to learn more about that, you could say .NET new and say -- help, and it'll tell you all the different things and the different templates. There's lots of different choices and things. This is all in the docs. Great question from Reg, who's saying, what about the CSS? That's a good point. Remember our layout. Our layout can include CSS. So you called out that layout's being shared everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That must be where the CSS is coming here, but I suppose I could add custom CSS on a page-by-page basis.
Yeah. And you can also it also includes Bootstrap, right? So so it has some of the CSS from there too. So,
right. So
but yeah, you can also do your own individual, like we do have on the .NET website, we do have some pages that have some specific CSS as well.
All right. And then Josh Taco is asking what the / output does. Good question. That is going to make sure that we output it to the pages folder. Otherwise, it might have shown up in another folder that we didn't want, right? And
you could also have run without that. If you were inside the pages folder, then you could have done that too.
That's a good point. Joseph in the chat is saying, can you change the namespace of a Razer file that doesn't have a code behind? Yeah, you can move those. You can update those namespaces automatically. So if we go in here and we look at pages, you can see our pizza page has just appeared, right? And then our pizza.cs, here's its namespace. That can be set to any namespace that we want.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like by default, it doesn't do anything. So I'm going to guess if we go and run this application, oops, let me clear that out, .NET run, or .NET watch rather. I got to remember to do that now, .NET watch. Okay. And let's go over here. And then we made a page called pizza. So I'm assuming that that's going to be at /pizza.
You should.
There you go. But of course, it doesn't do anything because we didn't put anything there. But we got the stuff outside. And then we see that Bootstrap gives us that menu, so it'll work on mobile devices. And then we still see our warning there in the bottom.
Okay.
Right. Cool. So we see that it's a page. That's the thing that a Razer page says at page. This at is called a directive, and it says an important thing is about to follow. So we are a page. Here's our model. We can share models, right? I don't have to have a one-to-one relationship between pages and models. And then what's this weird little thing here? What's going on there?
So whenever you see the @ right, it's an indication that you're about to call the Razer syntax, right? So you can add actual code there. So any, like in our case, sometimes when we have some meta like titles or descriptions or things that are specific to the page, we'll add it there. Maybe if you have a custom CSS as well for a particular page.
Yeah. I can just go like this if I want. Just
Yeah.
put some H1 there. I can see that that works, right? So I'm hooked up. And then if I wanted to write a little inline, you know, I don't need a page model. If I wanted to just for loop inside of there, I can do that. That's cool. All right, let's go back. Keep following along. This is a great point here. So, you know, I noticed here that the title is nothing.
It's empty.
And then a hyphen, and then the name of our project. All right. So that's an interesting one, because check this out. This is kind of weird. This took me a while to figure out, Maira. I'm curious if you figured this out right away. Remember before when we did our layouts, that code had all happened already. And then we had our little sub page here. What if I want to change the title, but it's too late? I've already done stuff, right? Well, we're going to copy this code here, and we're going to put the title into this thing called view data. It's just a bag of stuff. It's a hash table of stuff. We're going to say, hey, the title of this page is pizza. But it might feel like it's too late, but you'll recall right there in our layout page, view data title pulls it out of that bag. So we can kind of talk back and forth, can't we, between our layout pages?
You can change your layout page to have to capture those that information whenever you need something a little bit more dynamic.
Exactly. So there we see the hot reload pick that change up. Good question here from TC Coder asking why we're using the CLI or the command line rather than the IDE. Right now we're using this because we want people to see how to drive a stick shift. Right? If you drive automatic, you don't think about the engine, you don't think about what's underneath it. And when you use an IDE, that's very much an automatic shift car. It's kind of nice to drive stick occasionally, and you can see what's happening underneath. But you make a really great point, TC Coder, that if you want to follow along, Visual Studio will do a lot of this stuff for you. But they're just happening to do it this way.
And this works across all the platforms as well, right? So what we're doing here, you can do in Linux, you can do in the Mac. Like if we choose a specific editor, then it's going to work on just a particular OS.
That's a great point. For those of you who might be joining us a little late, .NET is not just Windows and hasn't been just Windows for almost 7 years. You can run it literally anywhere, even on a Raspberry Pi. So absolutely important to remember. All right, so let's kind of rock forward a little bit here.
Yeah, let's go.
let's make a pizza model. We need to make a thing called pizza. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to make a folder called models.
And that's some sort of convention, right? That models are put it inside a folder called model.
That's a great point. Doesn't have to be named models. Can be named data objects. Can be named Fred. Whatever makes you happy. We're just calling it models because we like that name and it's a convention. And a question there from Vikas, can we have multiple models? Absolutely. Have as many as you like. Have as many as you like. Now, add the following code to a file called pizza. So let's just copy this and then we'll go over and we'll look at the code in a second. So I'm going to go over here. I can see my new models folder. And I'm going to go and say new file. I'm going to Control V, pasted that in there, and I'm going to hit Control S. We'll call this pizza.cs. I'm going to make sure that that is inside of the models folder. Okay, so now we have a pizza file in the models folder. All right. And we'll just build that. Make sure everything lights up nicely. I'm not sure if that, there, we do have a namespace right there. We put it in a new namespace called Razer Pages Pizza. Now I don't know why.
This is basically describing like the structure of our object, right? So you have an ID, you have a name, the size, and you have some interesting attributes there as well.
Yeah, I don't know why our syntax highlighting kind of got goofy here and we lost it. Kind of falls apart down here, but I know that that's correct because it built, so we'll talk about that. So we have our namespace, we have our class, like you said, we have an ID that's an integer, we have a string, and it could be null. That's what the question mark means. String with a question mark at the end. All right. We have a size of a pizza, which could be small, medium, or large. That's a new enumeration, a new enum. We got a gluten-free option, and then a range. Apparently, we can have a $10,000 pizza.
That's an expensive pizza, like that Bitcoin one, though.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Great question here from Z Batata, who is saying, why did you have to start and stop the server? I didn't. Actually, that's a great point. I did start and stop the server because it's a habit of mine. So that's a great point. I probably could just keep it running. So we could actually try that. So a really good point there. Why did I restart it? Habit. These habits are hard to break, but a good reminder. Thank you for that.
But we'll see, because as we're adding code, some things might break up, like just in between until we finish the code. So let's see what happens there.
And when we say break, what we mean is the change was too much, like a large percentage of the application changed, and we couldn't hot reload it, so we did a full cold reload. Frank is asking if .NET 6 is available for M1 ARM. It is. It is absolutely available for M1 ARM. And we will try to do server-side validation in a little bit there, Naveen. Cool. Now, let's add a data service. So where's this pizza data going to come from? Could be a database, could be whatever. We're going to make a fake location.
Yeah, so in our case, it's going to be a very simple service that's going to be like in memory. But like in a real application, you might want to connect to your data, like your SQL Server or any database that you might have, or some storage, like blob storage or something. So in our case, it's going to be simple because this is like we're learning just to connect things to data bind, as we say. But you can change this in the future for an actual thing that's connected.
Exactly. And if you want, and we're going to be doing, there's entity framework, database example, learn modules as well. So we can follow along there. Let's go back here. Let's say our services folder, say new file. We'll call it, what did they say? Pizza service.cs?
I think so.
Pizza service, yeah. I'm just going to paste this in here. Now we're getting into some actual code here, starting to look more complicated. Let's pause a moment here, just briefly go over this. We're still part of models here. We're using models because pizza is being provided by the service. Now we're in a new namespace. Looks like we have a list of pizzas. Static list of, the way that you read this here is you read that as list of pizza. A good way to remember that is if you had a cup of tea. Well, they're trying to, IntelliSense is being too friendly for me. You know, you remember the old cup of tea joke, right?
Yeah. I love that mug.
Yeah. You remember that it's list of pizza and that's a cup of tea. Okay. And then we have two pizzas in here to start with. This is test data. And we've got two new pizzas. We have a service called getAll that returns the list of pizzas. We can ask for a pizza by ID. And we see the question mark there, meaning that we might get a null pizza. Who knows? Might be null. Don't know. Okay. And we have the ability to add a pizza and delete a pizza and then update one. But it sounds like the UI hasn't been set up for that yet.
And we have a comment there that we might have to review so it's Shanwas is saying it seems implicit using is limited to just program.cs. So we probably have to review that because it's not supposed to.
Yep.
But it's only implicit. So implicit means by default there's a set of using statements for your project that are included. So it's a web app, it's a set of namespaces that are included. So depending on the kind of application you're building, you're gonna get a set of implicit usings.
Yep.
But then if you want to add more implicit usings to your project, you can. So you need to create a global usings.cs file, I believe.
That's a great point. So right here, we are adding this explicit using because we didn't have it. But you'll notice that we're able to use a list of pizza. That's because using system.collections.generic is implicit, so that, to your point, it is not, in fact, limited to just programs.
Yeah, so we didn't have to do using system or any of the basics that are included by default.
Yep. And then Shawanaz, as well as Pakao, is saying that maybe I've got some extra semicolons. So the reason, this is me inferring now, I don't think that the extension for Visual Studio Code is familiar with this style of namespace. Notice how rather than a scoped namespace where I'm going like this, we have a namespace up there. If I changed it, see, look at that. See how everything gets colored correctly? So it looks like the version of the extension I have is not familiar with that. But as soon as I go like this, everything lights up. So I'm sure that that'll be fixed at some point. But this is actually a new syntax.
Yeah.
And the reason that we have that new syntax is really important. Take a look at this. Let's make the fonts a little smaller real briefly. And if I go like this, then traditionally I would then indent all of that. And then it gets farther and farther and farther and farther out. So the new style, and again, totally optional, allows you to outdent or bring left all of that stuff. So that's why our colors are incorrect. But very good point from our friends that are paying attention. Thank you for that. And someone else says it should have been a stack of pizza.
Not a list.
Missed opportunities, my friends. Missed opportunities. All right, let's do some pizza.cshtml. Now we're going to replace the contents with this new update. All right, so let's go over to our page. Now, I want to point out that I'm clicking around on the left right here, and I've got all these things open. I could close those, and I could hit Control P and just type pizza and then enter and go right there if I wanted to. So that's a good reminder.
That's one of my favorite commands in Visual Studio Code.
That's a great one. So let's paste that in there. And then, oh my goodness, look at all this stuff. What's happening here? What did I do wrong, Maira?
You were supposed to replace everything.
I was. So I was trying to be clever. And look what I did. I've got 2-page directives here. So you see here, it's complaining, saying, no, you can only have one. So I'm going to just delete all of that, put it back the way it was, and then we'll see those go away. So good reminder to follow the instructions. Okay. All right. So we have our page. We have an H1 with a list of pizza. We have a form. That form is kind of cool. It goes down to here, and you can actually hover. You see that right there? Look at that. I can open and close that. It's called a collapsing editor. So if we want to really learn, this is a great learning tool, the collapsing editor. See how it goes from line 9 to line 24? We have our H1, we have a form, and we have a table. So it looked scary a second ago, but now let's look at it this way. So what do we got here? We got a bunch of labels, name, size, labels and inputs, labels and inputs. And then these classes are Bootstrap 5.1, right? Okay. Then our table here has our table head with a single top row with table headers. TH means table header, name, price, etc., etc. And then we've got for each pizza in model.pizzas. Okay, so this is interesting. We might have an interesting bug here that we will go and fix. Could be just a spelling thing, and that might be an issue in the actual code that we're going to want to fix.
And that's why I said we would break things in a minute, just because as we're doing things, like we are updating the UI, but we haven't done the server side to see that new service and model we created, right?
Yep. So we got a couple of errors here, and we can go and figure this out, okay?
I think we should keep going on the lesson, and I think it will help us to.
Yep. So you think the lesson's going to tell us?
I think so. So explaining a little bit there about the tag helper, so maybe we can talk about that before we fix.
Okay. So the partial tag, let's go and say partial. We have a partial here, but not a full view. It's a partial view, right? And we're calling in that validation scripts partial. And this is a really great point. It's not a tag. This isn't an HTML tag, is it? There's no tag called partial.
No.
Right. That's a tag helper, which means that we can make any tag. I could make a Scott tag, and we can make a Maira tag, and it would do stuff. It would not render on the client side, Okay.
That's invoking that file that is in the share folder.
Yep.
The validation script.
Exactly. All right. We have a label here, and this is interesting. This can be a little confusing if you are familiar with HTML. There is a label in HTML, that is a thing, but HTML does not have ASP dash in there.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a little attribute that you can stick on there, and .NET, ASP.NET will look at that, and they will automatically put the value of that new pizza into the HTML. And when we get this to build, we'll see that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're like, we call that data bind, right? So you're connecting that field to the model field that you have. So you're connecting that UI element to the model.
Yep. That's a great point. All right. So I'm still nervous that things are broken, but you're telling me it's going to be better.
Yes, it's going to get better.
All right. So here we have that input tag helper, and it's just making the same point that you made, where this chunk here, this is HTML, this is HTML. This part is going to be evaluated on the server side, and it's going to look at our object, and it's going to put the name of it in there, and we'll compare that. All right. And then the validation summary, well, we haven't done any data input yet, but if there was an error, it would put that error there. Now you know that this is gonna fix itself. It seems like the instructions should have told me it would fix things, but now I'm nervous.
Yeah, so now we're gonna look. We're gonna look at the page model, right?
Okay, so let's go over there, and we'll look at our code behind, or our page model, that on get. Right now we don't do anything in on get. Nothing happens, so we don't really get any data at all, do we?
And since Jon is doing fixes, I see another fix we need to do in this lesson, which is I think, like, if you go back there, the implicit usings by default were in .NET 5, so now you need to clear that out because it's not longer there. So if you go to the next page.
We will figure that out. So
yeah, so this one still has the implicit using, so we can clear that up as well.
Right. So
I know Jon is making fixes.
So that one's there. That's correct. These are not necessary because they are implicit.
Yeah.
All right. Jon says I have to follow directions because it didn't tell you to run the code. Yeah, but I'm running watch, which lets me think that something's broken, right? Because you see over here, I got all these errors. It's freaking me out. And it says waiting for a file to change. So we're waiting patiently, my friends.
That's why I said we would break things before they run again, but it's expected.
Okay. All right.
All right.
So we know about the pizza model class. We saw this before, all the different characteristics of a pizza. We haven't really done anything with that. And it says, what method would you use to handle form submission? Well, I haven't done a get yet, but I guess it would be on a post.
Yeah.
I feel like I should have gotten this running by now, so that's making me a little nervous. Should this not build?
So
where's my get, my friends? Ah, here it is.
Yes.
Update. Okay, here we go. Update the get page handler to display the list. This is where I feel like I went 2 pages. There's the missing line. Look at that. When you do a get the pizzas. Ooh, okay. Let's do that. Go back over here. They're saying pizza doesn't exist because I probably didn't follow correctly.
We're probably missing an using statement somewhere.
They actually had me add it, and then I have to add it after the fact instead of, I think I would have added that first. So we'll go and we'll add it up here. Okay, a couple of complaints here still. I'm assuming that all this stuff is going to fix itself in a little bit, but I feel like I should know about these pizzas, right?
Yeah, so we can add just, I don't know if it should be there, but let's keep it's like the using statement for our model. That's probably not final.
So using Razer Pages pizza models.
And
okay, we'll build that. There we go. Now we have a lot less errors. And then it says something about a namespace cannot contain. Oh, so that was silly of me. Look at that, my friends. I put my list of pizzas inside the namespace instead of inside the class. There we go. We'll go ahead and
that should fix it.
Okay, now we're getting all kinds of other errors about this new pizza and that pizza service is not a thing that we know about. Okay, so down here, when I was saying, give me a pizza service, where was that error?
Let's see.
It's a little harder with the big font. Pizza model does not contain new pizza, and that is in pizza CSHTML line 14. So here, it looks like we're referring to something as something called new pizza. That's a variable that doesn't exist right here.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I must have made a mistake and missed something.
So in that, so we need the pizza, the new pizza should be like on a bind property.
Pizza list. There we go. I did that. I added the model. Here's my pizza. I added the service. Did all that. Here we're adding a reference to new pizza that doesn't yet exist yet. So that explains why that would be a problem. And then they're telling me about the tag helpers, which is cool.
Okay.
Jon is saying that I'm not following along.
We're skipping.
I don't know, my friend.
Let's see. Yeah, so we need to bind the model. So it's on step 7 there. So we should just keep going, and then I think everything will follow. So we need to add the using statements. So for models and services.
So we did our on get.
Yeah.
Then
so
we
there.
added models and services at the top.
So we need to add both.
So it says, add the following to the top pizza model. No. That's not correct.
No.
Pizza model. There we go.
Should be to the page model, right?
Page model right here. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And they're mad about that. Cool. All right.
And then you need
gluten-free. If it's, I see, they want gluten-free text.
Yeah, so that's our helper method.
Okay.
And we're going to be adding.
So they're adding that to this model here. So basically, when I have a pizza that is gluten-free, I look at this Boolean and I say, hey, if this is gluten-free, return this text. And this is interesting because we don't have the pizza model do it. We have the page do it. It's about responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just so you're not like cluttering the UI with lots of if statements. So you separate that and make it a cleaner.
Yep. All right. Then we have a post. Let's copy this post in. This is going to be a little bit interesting. We have a get. When you press a button, right, when you post data to the server side. I just tab that in there. We're going to say on post, if the state of the model, if the state of the form is not valid, then we're going to say, no, we're not ready to do it. If it is valid, we're going to add the new pizza, which we haven't yet defined, which is a little confusing. And then we'll just go back to the same page. We'll just kind of like post, redirect, get. That's a very common pattern, PRG, post, redirect, get. Okay. So I'm still concerned about this new pizza variable.
No, I think it's the next step. So now we're going to find
the pizza model class needs access to the pizza model. It will validate and pass those entries into the form. So here we go. This is really, really powerful. This is so powerful. We'll take a moment and talk about that, right? We got that form is just labels and text boxes, labels and text boxes, name, value, pairs.
Yeah.
So if we want to get those in here, how would we do that in the old days? Request.form.
Oh, yeah.
We have to
I already forgot all that.
Yeah. This line of code here, this thing that says bind would have been 5 or 10 lines of code. If you ever done this in PHP or in some versions of Python that don't have this ability, you would have to make a new pizza. And then for every single property, dig them out, pull it out, convert stuff, and then put them in there. So here, we're going to do that in pizza model. So we've got our potentially new pizza. And it says bind property. That's just one type of binding. We could bind the query strings, but in this case, we're going to bind the properties of this new pizza. Okay, so maybe we're going to build soon. Very exciting time.
Dun, 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 dun.
Okay, so this is an interesting bug here. Let's talk about this. So I'm getting an error here that says it's being used by another process.
Yeah, it's like you already have that running somewhere else, right?
Yeah, remember when I was chastised by our friend on the chat who said, hey, you should run .NET Watch all the time.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up a really great point here. I was running it over in this command line here. Good reminder, if you're inside of Visual Studio here, right? I could go and open up my own terminal here. It doesn't have to be over there, right? I could go and say, oops, I just pasted. I could go and say .NET Watch here. Have a terminal inside of here. Look at that. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, and it's going to open. It automatically opens your new page. And let's go see our pizza.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, we did it.
Going on? Look at that. What are those? That's pretty cool. Okay, let's prove that that's real, though. Let's prove that that's real.
And we added it on post. Okay.
I just want to prove that this is real.
Mm-hmm.
So look, see? I made a change here, and it automatically showed up over there. So that hot reload is, in fact, working.
So I think we added the on post for the add button. Wait, I don't think we have added the on post for the delete. So I think I was gonna ask if you like pineapple on pizza, Scott.
No, I don't want to lose our audience by making an opinion either way, because you can immediately lose everybody.
Yeah.
Look at that. So that clicking on that ad worked. Rizwan is upset that they've been waiting 45 minutes and the pizza is not yet baked. That's a great point. Josh Taco wants to call out a point here. Let's talk about this. See, let's look here. It says div class, and then it has a bunch of labels. Now you see it says ASP4, ASP4, ASP4. We all know that that's not real HTML.
No.
Okay? Someone named Garbage is saying if we'd used Visual Studio, it would have been done by now. That's probably true. But I wanted to mention, and it's good for you to know this, that we are driving stick shift today. We want to learn about the internals. So we're trying to learn about the internal bits, not having everything done for us.
And we're going slow as well. Like we're taking our time to explain well the concept. So it's like, yeah, we could have done that in 5 minutes or 10 minutes if we wanted, right? Like.
Yep. So look here. It says label 4 on line 14, ASP4, but the way it renders, the way it turns into something here, it's different, isn't it?
Yeah.
So new pizza underscore name. It also adds in some data validation attributes. So this means when we do that post, when we do that ad, you know, what's happening there? Let's take a look. I'm going to hit F12 in Edge here. You can use Edge or Chrome, doesn't matter to me. And I'm going to hit network, and I'll put in I don't know, double meat. And then we're going to watch on the right-hand side here. All right. You see the redirect.
So you have a get HTTP verb.
Yeah, I want to look for, there's a get. I need to turn on preserve log, otherwise we'll miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Test pizza. I'm going to hit an ad, and we're going to see those calls. That was a get. There was the post. There it is right there. Oops. What did I do? Network. What I wanted to show y'all was that. The name value pairs, right? Each text box turned into a piece of form data. .name, .size, .price. Okay.
And John is asking if you can add a free pizza. Have you tried that?
That's a great question. No, we can't. Look at that. We got validation error. So let's talk about this form data and that validation error. Good stuff. So first, we had that bind property. Those name value pairs from the post showed up here. They ended up in new pizza. So in the on post, we had a thing called new pizza. But look here, if it says if it's not valid, then we're not going to allow that. So John suggested a free pizza. And if we look at the pizza object, remember that we said that the price has to be at least a penny.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at that.
So there's so much like things that are happening behind the scenes that with the data annotations and the data binding that it's like you get a lot of code for free by using those helpers.
That's a great point. TC Coder says, did we get something for free with that bind property? Is that a constructor? This is not. The actual object was constructed here.
Mm-hmm.
But its properties were populated because bind property was there, right? So when we did the post, the name value pairs, name equals whatever, price equals whatever, gluten-free equals whatever, it said, oh, I'm going to bind all those properties. And the fact that the properties had the same name caused new pizza to be populated, right? And then because the model state was valid, we added it here.
And that's an interesting code as well, right, Scott? Like it's first checking if the model state is valid. So when it failed to, like, for example, your price was under 1 cent, then it just simply stay on the page and didn't add the new pizza, right? So it's you first check in just that validation script.
Yep.
And it checks also on the server side if everything looks good before submitting.
Exactly. A couple of other comments here. I want to point out that we created this service here in Pizza Service, and right now it's just test data, right? So here in the constructor, we just make a list of pizzas, and then we get the ID and whatever, and then we add some pizzas. So we're just using an in-memory database, aren't we? But you could use Entity Framework, and you could get this database from wherever makes you happy. And I'll give you a quick example of another we at the very beginning we mentioned my podcast, which also uses Razer, and the .NET website, which uses Razer. Do you have a database in the .NET website?
Not a database, but we use Azure Blob Storage for
Right.
some.
So your database is blobs, right? Kind
Yeah.
of. Yeah. So on my site, I've got a third-party website called Simplecast. It's a web service. So my database is a web service, and instead of having like pizza, I have shows, right? So when I call my list of shows, I have my shows have URLs and they have links and they have different stuff. So here's a show, right? A podcast has a title, has a status, has a published. It just happens to be coming from a JSON file somewhere out in the world, and yours might be coming from blob storage, and it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah,
So
and we have like the same structure with services and models and that kind of thing on our site.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think you missed one last thing there for handling the on-post delete. So that's a separate method there.
Oh, that's a good
The
point.
delete button.
So if I hit delete, you don't think it'll work, do you?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it got all confused. So that did not work at all. Okay, so let's fix that real quick. We'll go back here and we'll take that and we're going to paste it in. So we have the code behind. We have on get, on post. Now this is called on post delete because we're using a post and sending a delete message. There are other HTTP verbs, aren't there, like post and head, but we're not using those, but we're going to use post and delete. Okay. And then it says we can link around. Actually, we don't have a we don't even have a link to the homepage, do we? Right?
Yeah. That's like your mantra of one click, right? From homepage, we should be able to
one click to get anywhere. So let's add that link over here.
All right.
Okay.
Let's see.
So we have home, we have pizza list. There we go. Look at that. Delete, delete, delete. Huh?
Awesome.
That's pretty slick. That's pretty slick. Now, again, let's just review. Here, we're calling the pizza service and saying delete.
Yeah.
The page doesn't know about a database, does it? Right?
No. And there's one interesting thing there as well, where you're redirecting to get. So why are we doing that on post?
Yeah. So there's this thing. It's called PRG, post redirect get. Every time you do an action on a website, for the most part, you know, like I type something, and we're on the page right now. We're not talking to the back end. We hit add. We're going to do a post, and we're going to post this data like we saw. But then we need to do the thing, update the database, and then we'd like to redirect back to the same page we're already on, which would then do a get.
Yeah.
So post, redirect, get. It just happens so fast that it seems impossible. And we can prove it again by going here, and we can click this button here that says preserve log in our browser tools. We'll say test, we'll give it a price, and we're going to hit add. That was the post. It says action get, but that's not true. There was the redirect. So we can say post. Here's our post. There it is. There's our post. So here's our new data.
Yeah.
Right. And then the response. In this case, it was using WebSockets. So we were seeing switching protocols. If I turned off the .NET Watch stuff, we would see a 302 redirect, and then we would see another get.
Awesome.
So is that
I think we made it. So I think congrats. So watch out for the other lessons. The other lessons will be different. So we have, do you still have that page up for the next? I think we're going to be talking about microservices and Blazor. And so watch out.
Where do we go to that? Yeah. So here, and there's also a whole series of videos on how to use ASP.NET. We go into like hours and hours and hours of detail. But where was the website for?
That aka I forgot.
aka.ms/learnlive.
Yes, that one.
There we go.
Yeah, so we're gonna have other episodes every week for the web learn series, right? So
Yep.
Stay tuned for the next ones. We're gonna have Jon that was helping out today, and some other teammates coming and showing more about ASP.NET. So this one was about Razer, and we're gonna have different lessons.
Yep. And if you found some of the C# confusing, you can go to the .NET webpage, and we've got a whole series on learning C# as well as things on Learn Live. And then just a reminder, if you go to the .NET webpage, you see how that live TV button is pulsing red right now because somebody's live. So you can go and find somebody to talk
And
to.
that would be us.
And right now it's us. Look at that. But look, we've got people coming up every day. There's something fun happening in the .NET space. So thank you, all of our friends. I see Brian Kohler says this is pretty poggies. That's a good thing. My son says that that's a good thing. We appreciate you hanging out with us. And we will explore even more .NET in coming.
Yeah, and let us know what you'd like to learn. We've saw some authentication requests, so like other things that other subjects that you'd like to see some experts coming on. Let us know. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I thought this went really well. Thanks for hanging out with me, Maira.
No, thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thanks to all of our friends on Twitch and on YouTube who are watching us right now. And we will see you again soon. Follow us on social media.